Hey and welcome! No matter where you start your Doom journey, be it in one of the many modern source ports on PC, on the Doom Classic Unity port, or even on one of the many console releases across the years, at its core, Doom is an excellent, fun and frantic experience. But what if I told you there's one Doom experience that is so unique, so different, yet so well regarded by many who've experienced it, and yet it's rarely given the spotlight to shine? What if I told you there's a console port of Doom that does things the PC version simply could not? A console port that has its own unique levels, incredible soundtrack, and changes the look and feel of the Doom experience while remaining true to it? What if I told you the only way to officially experience this was on a 1990s console, and that fans have kept its memory alive through their own ports and attempt to bring it forward? I'm not talking about Doom 64, that's an amazing game in its own right. I'm actually talking about the PlayStation 1 release of Doom. PlayStation 1 Doom remains one of the most unique ways to experience the original Doom games. It's a port that is both ambitious and extensive in its output, packing in not only the Ultimate Doom, but Doom 2 as well, throwing in its own levels for good measure. So why has the PS1 version of Doom never seen a re-release, remaster, or re-release as an add-on in any version of Doom? In this video, I'm going to outline the main reasons for me why this version of Doom deserves its own modern re-release, whether that be as a full release or as an add-on in the official ports. And yes, I am fully aware that there are fan conversions of this already in the wild, much like there were for Doom 64 in the years before it got a re-release. By its very nature, Doom is a very visually pleasing game, transitioning from the cold steel of the UAC bases to the corrupted towers and hallways deep within hell. The game manages to convey this excellently. PS1 Doom takes this and amplifies it to the max. Coloured lighting is introduced and used to great effect throughout the levels. It doesn't sound like a huge addition, but play these levels back to back with their PC counterparts and it's very hard to not feel the PC version missed out by not including this. It adds character and intrigue where it otherwise would be overlooked. Toxic pools now glow with irradiated terrifying light. Candles now burn bright with the colours that they show. Shadows are enhanced across the game, meaning enemies have more places to hide and cower from your oncoming fury. The other versions of Doom play with lighting by upping the shadows and making things darker. In PS1 Doom, you are no longer walking through perfectly lit areas, you're now trembling through darkened corners that feel unique. PlayStation 1 Doom also makes use of animated skyboxes. In theory, this doesn't sound like a big deal, but it looks amazing when you step outside and see the flames of hell shooting up all around the level. It just adds so much to the tension and the visions of what you're seeing in the levels. Combining all of this creates something wholly unique and breathes fresh air into what many people may have already experienced many times over. But it's not just here where the game goes hard on atmosphere. Perhaps most importantly, we have to talk about the music. Doom is well known for its music. That bombastic blast of metal-inspired MIDI goodness has played as the soundtrack to many Doom sessions. It just hits right in the moment. But the PlayStation version of Doom elects to eject all of that. Unlike a lot of the other console ports which offered their own interpretations of the original soundtrack, PS1 Doom instead uses a soundtrack composed by Aubrey Hodges. When I tell you that this completely shifts the tone of Doom, I'm not lying. Now the soundtrack is quiet, deliberate and eerie. The screeches of demons and the wails of the unseen are evocative and terrifying. It's a completely different take on what Doom is, yet fits so perfectly and enhances the horror and gothic aspects of the game. You're no longer bombing through levels to insanity. You're fighting the loneliness of being the only human left on a base filled with demons that want to kill you. Just listen to these tracks. I understand fully that this is not how some people want to experience their Doom games. Some will say these are just noises, but when combined with the other additions to PS1 Doom, it creates the most unique way to experience Doom that simply isn't replicated on any other platform. Both the PC and PS1 soundtracks enhance the Doom experience and show how versatile the core gameplay experience is. It's not only the soundtracks that I think hit the spot. New enemy noises and groans have been added in, adding variety to the roster of iconic monsters, as well as to the weapons of Doom. For me personally, I just feel what the PS1 version of Doom does with its sound design is incredibly underrated. It's no secret that the PlayStation 1 version of Ultimate Doom makes use of the Jaguar level set. This level set was developed by id Software themselves and cuts down on geometry in the Doom levels to make it fit onto consoles easier. Some people prefer these levels, a lot don't, and it's a very subjective issue. One thing that can't be denied though is that these levels are a part of Doom history. There are many players out there who've only ever experienced these versions of these levels. And there are many players who've jumped on in recent years who probably don't even know what these levels are. As such, it's important that these levels are represented in the modern ports in some way, so that people can go back and experience how a lot of people saw Doom for the first time. And for my money, I feel that PS1 Doom is easily the best way to experience these. The addition of all the atmospheric techniques we talked about earlier really brings out the best in these Doom levels and adds layers of ambience to the experience. Even when flipping between the PC version of these levels and the PS1 version, they have completely different atmospheres. I'm not saying that these levels are better or worse, it's very much a case of level by level, but offering modern gamers the chance to experience these without having to leap through hoops and go through unofficial channels or dig out their old consoles is very important in my opinion. For a lot of people, these levels are Doom. They are the Doom that they played as kids on their PlayStation 1s or their Sega 32Xs, or even on the SNES if you were that unlucky. Let's be honest, it's a terrible version. All I'm saying here is that PS1 version of Doom delivers the best of these versions of levels in my opinion, and I feel that if you were going to bring them to the modern consoles, this is the best way to achieve that. And they should be available on the modern consoles as add-ons at least. But while we're talking about PlayStation 1 Doom, let's discuss the fun exclusive levels that it has, because not only does it bring the Jaguar levels to the table, it also has its own exclusive levels that in some cases are probably better than a lot of the levels that made it onto the PC version. I've covered a lot of these levels across numerous videos on my channel, but PS1 Doom comes packing 6 exclusive single player levels, and I'd argue that all of them bring something interesting to the table. Threshold of Pain is a fully fleshed out final level that goes all in on atmosphere, and even has a fun final room that's evocative of Icon of Sin with its spawning enemies. Twilight Descends for me is an excellent Doom level which easily matches the quality of the majority of PC Doom levels, even exceeding quite a few of them. The Mansion is equally strong and has its own identity, a level that would easily slot into the main roster of Doom 2 PC levels without anyone noticing. The Marshes is hugely underrated and arguably does a better job of showcasing the threat of the Cyber Demon than 99% of the retail Doom levels. There's no other level quite like it in any other retail Doom game, except for maybe Cat and Mouse in Doom 64, but I'd argue that this is an even funner level to explore than that. Club Doom is out and out fun. It's a level that's there as a lap of honour and stands uniquely among all the Doom levels as being one of the few that really doesn't take itself seriously at all. And I'm not the biggest fan of Threshold of Pain. I think it's a bit of a letdown as a final level to Doom 2, but it's got one of the most unique encounters, letting you see two spider masterminds face off against each other. The point I'm making here is that the majority of these levels are very much worth the time of most Doom players, and only add to the strong levels found in the base game for both 1 and Doom 2, and in some cases outdo the weaker levels completely. PlayStation Doom comes packing both Doom 1 and Doom 2, but it doesn't just straight port the existing level sets from those games. It ends up curating a lot of levels and putting levels into the mix that were either cut from other console ports of Doom or were weak in their original appearances, so that means no downtown in Doom 2, but that does mean you get Tower of Babel in Ultimate Doom. Perhaps the biggest change is that it puts Doom 2 enemies in the original Doom game. Every now and then you'll bump into a Chain Gunner, a Revenant, a Hell Knight, a Mancubus, or even a Pain Elemental where you wouldn't expect them. I've always been curious how these enemies would have been used in Ultimate Doom, and this console port answers that question by sprinkling them in and treating them like any other enemy. There's also a new enemy in the form of the Nightmare Spectre, exclusive to the PS1 version of this game. He's a bit more aggressive and a lot nastier to fight. You can also cheat and give yourself the super shotgun in Ultimate Doom, something that feels incredibly wrong but hilariously overpowered in practice. It ends up feeling like a best of version of Ultimate Doom and adds real flavour to a level set that is so familiar to Doom players. My final point is that this has kind of already been done with Doom 64 and Quake 64, although in different ways for both of those. Doom 64 spent the better part of 20 plus years sat on N64. Many praised the game, some hated it. It was a huge part of Doom canon that was left sat out in the cold for the longest time. Fans ported it to PC themselves, and eventually the game amassed a large enough cult status that it finally saw a re-release to coincide with the release of Doom Eternal in 2020. I remember plenty of discussions were had about whether the game even needed to be ported and whether people would actually want to buy it in the modern day, and looking back now, it's kinda crazy that we had to wait so long for a re-release of Doom 64. The point is, it's accessible to people on multiple consoles, and a whole new generation of gamers can appreciate what Doom 64 brought to the table. The funny thing there is that Doom 64 was made by the same team that made PS1 Doom a reality. Quake 64 is a more interesting discussion as it isn't a true port of the N64 game, instead it's an add-on that replicates the look and feel of the console port. Some people do not like this, but the fact that this is the easiest way to recreate Quake 64 on modern consoles, and it's free to anyone who buys the Quake Remaster on PC or consoles, is pretty incredible. And yes, there are quite a lot of issues with that add-on, but that's outside of the scope of this video. The fact is, it's available. To my mind, PS1 Doom does enough difference and adds enough to the Doom experience that it's worthy of at least being considered for one of these routes. There's also a bunch of other little reasons why a re-release of PS1 Doom would be cool. PS1 Doom was released in the early days of console FPSs, and thus is tied to the 1995 PS1 controller without the joysticks. Even emulating the game means people run into this issue, and while Doom ended up delivering one of the best console FPS experiences on PS1, so much so that other PS1 games lifted the scheme wholesale, the fact is that dual analog controls or mouse and keyboard controls would make it a much better experience. It would also be nice to be able to play these versions of the game without the performance issues that can sometimes crop up. In particular, when things get busy in large levels, the performance can tank pretty quickly and it can be frustrating. My intention with this video isn't to demand or argue against people that don't want this. It's not something that everyone wants, and I accept this. But for me, as someone who loves chronicling old video games and someone who grew up in this era of Doom, it would be really cool to see it more represented fully. This is just a silly video by someone who loves playing Doom and wants modern gamers to experience it to its fullest. All the bells and whistles that the Doom Unity port would offer is such an appealing thought and would rightly give this version the standing it deserves. But that's just my 2 cents on it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would you buy this re-release if it was put out there? Would you play this as an add-on if it was put out onto the Doom ports?